Before I share certain, conceptual frameworks, research frameworks, and share with you some of the studies that can provide us some of the answers on these questions, I think that it's important that we are also aware of the research framework that we are dealing with when we are talking about all these kind of benefits and impacts of service learning on students. Now, without any doubt, the largest portion of research studies that have been done in the past 40 years, 50 years, are focused on students. Then a little less portion of it is focused on academics themselves. And the least of the portion is focused on communities, on community partners, community representatives. So I don't think that anyone knows how many thousands of studies have been done that are focused on students and different kind of benefits that students gain from participating in service learning projects. But focusing on the long-term outcomes, we need to be aware that there is still a limited research out there, right? And the thing is that there is little consistency in research results. There are a lot of case studies, which are nice, which are great, that can be very inspiring, right? But that are usually very descriptive and without that robust kind of data that really supports the idea of a long-term outcomes. Then what we need to take into account that all those case studies and all those particular stories are coming from different contextual backgrounds. So what service learning is here might not be at the same extent somewhere else. So when we are reading about service learning projects, practices, and classes, particularly in those frameworks of case studies, if they are not really well explained and in depth, we actually do not know what service learning is as a certain institution or as part of a certain course. Another challenge is differences in methodological approaches, right? So different kind of research designs are out there, but unfortunately what's going on in the research literature is that those designs are rarely well explained, again, so that you can have sort of a full information and the idea of a whole context of the studies. And what's really important for discussion on the long-term outcomes are the last three bullets. So scarce studies that have really both control and experimental group, so if we want to compare, right? Scarce longitudinal studies and scarce studies with actually service learning, let's call them alumni. So please just take all of that into account, not because I want you to take all those results that I'm going to share with you with a grain of salt. It's not that, but that we as academics at least need to, appreciate the context of research that we are using in promoting, marketing service learning as we were discussing today. So all those hundreds of thousands of studies are definitely proving that the students' participation in service learning project is associated with positive outcomes in at least 5 areas. I kind of tried to group those areas sort of as a meta-analysis of all different kind of research that it's out there. So it's about attitudes towards self, and we have been actually discussing some of that today. We had a discussion about the confidence as well, right? Attitudes toward education as such, and the learning process and the journey of learning, academic achievement, social skills, and civic engagement. And the last one is actually the focus of what I'm going to talk to you in the next 15, 20 minutes. So why is that? Why even there are long-term outcomes, and how are they generated? And there are different kind of perspectives reading through all those papers. And if we talk about it from an educational perspective, so what's going on? So usually a lot of people that are framing their own papers within this kind of perspective talk about service learning as a platform, as an element that really engages students in discussing, or at least let's start in, seeing, appreciating, and then, confronting, and the ideal is fully understanding different kind of social issues, right? So this is sort of kind of a journey, right? So students' engagement in service learning usually offers different kind of perspectives. Often there are new perspectives for students as well, following by altered ways of thinking, right? Then reasoning at a higher level. And again, the ideal, right? It's about reorganizing their own thinking patterns, reorganizing, right, their own perspective on a given situation, given problem that they are working with, given context of their own communities and social issues that are embedded in those communities. Beside the educational perspective, there is an evolutionary thinking perspective, and Alina raised that issue also today. So what do evolutionary thinkers tell us about this process of service learning, right, and how it can contribute to having various long-term outcomes, is that they see service learning as a mean of promoting social and moral development among students, and as a platform not only for learning, right, but for boosting empathy. And again, something that has been raised throughout the morning session several times. We heard a lot of empathy going around the room. And now following the sort of just the basics, right, of evolutionary thinking is that early structured behaviors, right, form the fabric of those future, right, patterns of behaviors of those contemporary. And the idea is that pro-social behavior then, let's say at the university level, and even better if we can, downscale it at a high school level, even at the elementary school level, right? There are even now a lot of discussions around service learning at a kindergarten level as well. Is definitely seen, as a platform then for building habits of, assisting, of serving, of helping, of engaging, of raising issues, of confronting issues. And what's really interesting from this evolutionary thinking perspective is that this is where we stop talking only about the individuals, and we are talking about community cohesion. So initial behaviors of all those individuals engaged in service learning projects definitely facilitate the group standards. So this is sort of the logic, right, of their own thinking. So, and also it was raised, I can't remember by whom, sorry, this morning, that individuals who witness other people in need, right, sort of an evolutionary moment, just feel the need, feel obliged to be there, to assist, to help, to support, right, to provide, their own support whenever they can, whenever it's needed. And this is why, right, they think that, starting shaping such behaviors at an early age, and a lot of evolutionary psychologists particularly claim that the university level is already too late, right? That they really do, that this kind of behavior that stem from the experience, this is why I think Maria Rosa said this morning, however we call it, it's about knowing that it's an experiential learning, right? So boosting those kind of behaviors from offering students opportunities to have direct experience with certain needs, certain problems, certain social, right, issue, and it's a nice quote here, will form a glue, right? It sort of serves as a glue for the fabric of, future behavior, of continuing developing these kind of behavioral patterns. And when students learn to help the community, when students learn to have this kind of pro-social behavior, the evolutionary psychologists say it's most likely that they will just continue, because it will become, like we said this morning, Philip, you said, like, if the service learning becomes the DNA of a certain tissue, right, of a certain fabric, in this particular case, of our behavior, of students' behavior in the context of serving others, even after their own diploma, graduation, and the exact experience they had within their own study program. There is another interesting perspective that I think might kind of fit well the Uniservitate context as such, and it's an ethical perspective on service learning, and it's a perspective on virtue and social justice ethics. So what do authors researching and writing there say that service learning can be seen also as a platform for highly internalized moral standards of students, right? And when there is greater interest in, commitment to, and sensitivity towards communities, different kind of communities that we share in our local community and their needs, then it includes later on, which is really important for the long-term effect of staying active, whether we call it politically, civically, voluntary, engaged, but the strong beliefs of young people that they can actually make a difference, that they can actually make a certain contribution to a positive social change. And this is sort of this glue as well that they will likely take on in their life as well, which is why it is very important, that we can talk now of our level, right, the university level of our framework, but whether is it a high school, the elementary school, or whatever kind of, educational environment, it is important that we all build together this socially responsible educational environment. Now, regardless of the introductory slide, and when I told you, there are scarce studies, we have to take that into account, still there are a lot of studies that are proving that, so we can discuss it, we can take it, as a certain argument. So let's now dive a bit into studies, right? What do they say about these long-term effects that service learning might have on students? This idea to contribute to the community development even after they graduate. So I also try to kind of wrap them in several clusters to follow more easily. So this one is about pro-social attitudes and behaviors, and I try to you can see all different kind of references here, and I hope that if you're interested, you can ask me, but I think you might easily find them just by the references. So these are some of the research results that sort of that were just simply coming out and coming out and coming out. So these were recognized as patterns, right, coming from different kind of studies and from different kind of educational and cultural frameworks as well. So it's about service learning courses contributing to students' pro-social attitudes, contributing to their level of acceptance of cultural diversity and reduction of prejudices. And all of this is kind of, we can see as a proxy of their own future, community engagement and contribution to the community development. Service learning contributes to, and we heard about it right today, to changing their attitudes, to their own, increased awareness of social issues, of accepting people, with whom they were working throughout different kind of service learning project, increased empathy, there is again, right? And this last sort of section, colored in yellow, it's about contributing to greater social responsibility, to increased sense of social accountability, increased voluntarism, and there are even some of the papers, I'm going to come back to that later, that are showing that this sort of prolongs to at least the next 5 years. So after the graduation, the students who were part of the service learning projects are more likely to stay engaged at least for the next 5 years after they finish their graduation. And developing more caring relationships with others. This element of care is also something that we have been discussing this morning as well. Now, when I started to dig different kind of quasi-experimental studies, so those studies that were having control and experimental group, These are the studies that I found, and of course, take into account that those are all papers published in English. So there could be a lot of things going on in Spanish, in German papers, but I was not able to include them in this analysis. So students who participated in the service learning courses show greater understanding of community problems, for example, or higher social accountability and responsibility. We already had that one. More developed civic competencies, higher appreciation of and for their own commitment to future engagement in the community. And the last one, not the least, definitely, greater gains in attitudes involving political and social justice awareness and civic actions. So not many of those studies, but still very interesting and definitely sending a certain message that we can build upon, you know, our own narrative on service learning, our own projects, our own strategies of promoting towards students or different kind of stakeholders that we might be interested to collaborate with. Another sort of group of those kind of studies that I decided to share with you are those research studies that show positive and significantly higher research results in measuring civic attitudes. And at this point, there are these 4 quite popular instruments, scales already developed, validated, and that have been used in many different studies. Again, there is a challenge here because I've read some of the papers. There is a challenge when the people are doing translations to different kind of languages, so you might lose a certain, nuance of a certain part of the instrument. But there is this community service attitude scale, civic action scale, civic engagement scale, and civic-minded graduate scale, and research studies done using all 4 of those studies have really been, in favor of contributing to this research database and results of showing positive outcomes of students' participation in service learning. Now, let's just move a bit to the future aspect, to the future perspective, to those actually long-term perspective research results. So you can see also references here for each of them. So students who participated in service learning courses show that they are more likely to become volunteers up to 5 years after their own graduation. And that they have clear intentions to become more civically active by continuing to be volunteers in certain kind of organizations in their own communities. They have clear intentions to seek a job, actually, that offers working with disadvantaged groups. Positive attitudes toward own responsibility, social, personal. Again, clear intentions to seek and hold a job in a service-related field. And this is quite interesting. I found just 3 or 4 studies discussing this, but this was a change of students in thinking about their own careers. So this was a moment, so participating in service learning projects for them was that click that made them actually reorganize their own ideas about their own future professional journey. And they actually really wanted their first job to be a service-related job. And the last one here talks about students' clear intentions of higher personal political participation in the future. So, still, there is a nice body of studies, discussing quite seriously the long-term effects of service learning. Another interesting study, I wasn't able, if you know and have, please share it with, not just with me, with the whole group. This one was interesting because it really placed certain variables, as a significant predictors of students' levels of future commitment. And this Austin study and it's already 22 years old study, discusses, participation in service learning courses as a predictor, of students' commitment to activism, community and political action, promoting racial understanding, pursuing a service-related career. So it's not just about first job and first working experience, but now it's about actually a career, so making it a career. Interestingly, studies shown gender differences. I mean, I know that gender usually, is there and is an interesting attribute that shows frequently differences, particularly in the field of education and studies in the education. But here what was quite interesting is that those two studies showed that both groups, so female and male, became more civically engaged, but in a completely different way and with the different perspectives, different philosophies in mind. So you can see here that for females, it was about, fostering collaboration, working in teams, working in groups, facilitation skills, and increased, while for the men it was about the self notion, right, self-awareness. So interesting studies because they discussed then the differences between this sort of philosophy of caring, that's more of a female philosophy, and it's again related to evolution, it's again related, right, with other aspects that are outside of the educational field, and sort of this kind of normative perspective that is more in line and portrayed as a dominantly male perspective. Again, with the volunteering as well. So volunteer experiences increased both female and males, right, values of citizenship, but only women gaining the value of common purpose. Right? So again, it's related to this kind of caring philosophy. And then again, female tended to adopt more democratic, more participatory styles, working with different kind of, community representatives in their own service learning projects, while males seem to adopt styles that are more directive, more autocratic. So this was just sort of a bit and bite of the gender differences, just to know that even when designing a service learning course, when designing different kind of methods that you want your students to engage with, that it might be beneficial to think about these kind of studies and these kind of results, because they might actually assist you in, reorganizing maybe some of the activities or the roles that you were intending to assign to certain groups of students, because obviously gender as such facilitates different kind of maybe experiences, different kind of learning journeys. Again, what studies show that usually it's about high quality service learning experiences that are facilitating those kind of changes. And these are studies done with the service learning alumni, right, population. So high quality service learning experiences are more likely to yield positive civic outcomes, associated with alumni attitudes towards social and personal responsibility. There is a lot of social and personal responsibility here as well. Positively associated with alumni involvement in post-college community service, and again, service-related careers. And service learning alumni that were having this high-quality service learning experiences are likely to accept first employment, right, in service-related fields. And this high quality, what does it mean, right? High quality service learning. So in those studies, it was described through more hours of service, more reflection activities, actually more integration of service, right, into the courses, more interaction between students themselves and between students and community representatives, and more discussions and interactions in a way to form activities that's going to push students into working with themselves into working with different kind of community members and community representatives. So those two studies had actually quite focused on reflection. So that designing reflection in a way that's more dynamic, more interactive, more sort of as a liminal, the interesting studies portraying service learning as a liminal experience, meaning like something that is completely different in comparison to the experience they had before they got into the service learning course, and with experience that are going to come later after they finish service learning course. So it's something in between that it's completely different. And if you go back, maybe place it within the theory of transformative learning, this is why it is transformative, because it's a completely different experience on their educational journey. And this is the last one, and I wanted to end with this one, just not to leave you with, a lot of different kind of research results, but what can we do with those research kind of results, right? So these are, so definitely studies that show that service learning has a positive impact on long-term attitudes of students to serve community in, after they finish their own studies and graduations. So these would be some kind of recommendations, right, when designing a service learning course. And I think that we were discussing this morning as well, so how to organize a course that's going to cultivate more civic outcomes, right? So these would be some of the recommendations. So this is something that I said this morning as well to the Vice Chancellor. Develop quality long-term partnerships with community organizations rather than identifying those organizations as placements for students. Identify projects and address real, concrete, vivid, important, messy, uncomfortable social issues rather than using a charity approach. Okay? So this is about change. It's not about trying to fill in the gap, right? Develop contacts with diverse community groups. Why? Because it can really decrease conflicts, it can decrease students' prejudices, it provides a platform for students to better understand pluralism, to better understand diversity, to better understand inclusivity. This was also something that we have been discussing this morning. Also something important, integrate social issue related readings and resources. So whatever issue is anchored in that particular service learning course or project, make students read about it, make students watch different kind of videos about it, interviews about it, newspapers, right, that tackle that kind of issue. Of course, in addition to disciplinary readings that are part of the course. And then leaning on what I said here about the high quality service learning experience, design activities that's going to encourage students to interact with each other. They're going to encourage students to interact with different kind of community groups that are under number 3, right? And use multiple reflection in your activities that really include structured discussions, right? And because that's the thing that's going to encourage students to acknowledge and even better to understand and even more better to accept different kind of multiple perspectives. So thank you.
So we will talk about, this was the topic suggested that I should prepare about appropriate assessments in service learning. And now, seeing so many aspects and issues and, what can we do and what has been done so far, it becomes quite complicated, to think about appropriate assessment. How can you assess all those components of service learning, in which phases and how to do it. But as Bojana said, I tried, to writing. Probably most of us are using or we are thinking to use journal writing. It's very easy, the technique, and it has also a psychoeducational value, you can work with expressive writing and so on. So it is recommended that when we use this technique in order to create an appropriate assessment, to use or to think about how to structure it, So yeah, we have the journal writing, but it is important to have it in a structured manner, okay? So here we can create a set of questions to prompt the students to think, okay? To reflect about their activities, feelings, including self-compassion, because many people just ignore this part, okay? Self-compassion, they only think about engaging the students on you know, sympathy, empathy, and compassion. Compassion is often defined as directed empathy when you decide to do something, okay? So feeling, perception, values, attitudes, and here you already mentioned this scale, Bojana. Civic action scale, it's a subscale actually of this questionnaire and of Mary et al. 2002. We did translate it in Romania and we had some problems with some of the subscales. So, because probably some concepts are not that you know, used in the Romanian language. Like it was the same problem with solidarity. I remember with our colleagues from CLAIS, you know, when you said, how do Romanians define solidarity? Well, we are a former communist country. Solidarity means putting all the people together to do something, okay? After you get you know, an order from the party or something. That was, you know, most of the definitions we got from people like over 40, okay? So from the young people it was different. So we approach, you know, the definitions that you have, working together, not for somebody in the community. We can also use parts, okay, of the content of our curricula, quotes, so that the students can reflect on those, okay, statistics. And then it is recommended to use the diary to create an appropriate assessment tool in service learning, to ask the students to submit this journal like on a weekly basis, if it's possible, and if we work with small groups of students. Because I remember some of you mentioned yesterday over dinner that what do we do when we have 200 students, okay? And you have to coordinate 200 students and that. It was you, isn't it, Katja? Yeah, they're not, it's not really possibly feasible, but if it is feasible or you do it on an electronic base, you know, and it's easy for you just to give them feedback on the reflection and to stimulate more reflection, okay, then it works. So here I really like this part, and I remember Bojana telling us a story about a student involved in a service learning project in acting, so they are future actors, okay? And she was quite reluctant, but in the end, she saw the children involved, they created a, you know, performance, and she was crying in the end. That's just a short story. So we can ask, in case these things happen, you know, that you see that a student who was reluctant at the beginning, not that motivated, you know, transform herself or himself, then we can ask the students to pick up those journal passages that reflect their transformation, okay? And then we can ask them to write an essay, you know, in a form about this transformation. And here, this is from Rutgers University. I got it personally from the person who is coordinating the service learning course. They do it in a form of 1 month course. You don't have to try to read, because I will explain what is there. They are coming from the social work school, okay? And their service learning is a signature pedagogy. And what they are doing, they are structuring the journal, or the diary, as well, are structuring based on the 9 core competencies of the social work profession. And I think this is very innovative, you know, because then students, while they have to fill in, they also learn and they become aware of the competencies. They are guiding their profession. So there they have to give examples. For example, these students from this course are coming for nearly 12 years to Romania for 1 month. And they are, based on collaborations with NGOs and special education schools, groups of 2, 3, or 4 students, now I will use placement. They are being placed okay, in those institutions, and together with Romanian students from social work, they work together for 4 weeks. And every week they have to entry in these diaries, you know, and the teacher gives them feedback and so on. And of course, each activity is designed together with the special educator and social workers from the institutions, okay? For example, they work with children from prison fellowship, probably you heard about them, that have their parents in prison, one of them, or they come from low socioeconomic status families. They design activities for helping them to get more autonomous in terms of, taking care of themselves or helping them with learning, literacy, and stuff like that. So here you can see, for example, 3 competencies, demonstrates ethical and professional behavior, what types of behaviors, and then you have to provide evidence. What did you do in each week, okay, of your presence there. And I'm approaching the end of my presentation. For the group reflection, these are my colleagues from the anthrozoology. We all work with animals here. You can see on our faces. This guy works with, he's very known worldwide, and he works with free-ranging dogs. Okay, so has very nice, Marco Ada, if you look for some. He's from, I think from Portugal, but he lives now, I don't know, in Morocco or somewhere. So he lives all over the world. So you can do group reflections like this or like that, okay? Sometimes we can organize a focus group, but it's not necessary to go that far, okay? But to create an appropriate assessment from a group discussion, again, it is recommended to try to prepare the questions in advance, leave place for spontaneous questions that might arise, okay, but it's important to have also some guided, structured questions, okay? And here in these group discussions, again, it is recommended to have, to include in the group discussions, if possible, members of the community, okay, of the institutions or NGOs that we are working with. They can participate, they can be participants or facilitators, okay? So now that's my nearly, no, it's the second to the last, because we talked so much about reflection and empathy, and we are again some psychologists around, and social workers. I think there are some graduates of social work. No. Okay, where is Betka? Okay, because actually the model is rooted in neuroscience, and so you can find it also in many studies on neuroeducation. But it is used by social workers, to build, to design transformative reflections. So we can think about including all these 4 dimensions in our structured diary, our structured group discussions. So in this way, people start to think, to get aware, okay, did this happen to me? Did I gain something on the ability to affecting sharing or self-awareness? Yes. Many of you already said that self-awareness is, I really like that result on gender, So it appears that the mechanism of change goes through self-awareness in males, isn't it? That's, it's interesting. Perspective taking and mental flexibility and emotion regulation and behavioral regulation, which both are very, very important, okay? If we work on emotion regulation, we also can prevent the installation of emotional burnout, okay, and other compassion fatigue and other factors that can, other processes that can impact the mental health of our students. And we should not forget that empathy and compassion development, or teaching empathy, can be, in many service learning courses, they are learning objectives, and educational outcomes, sorry, okay, yeah. But of course, they can be placed in the learning, when we formulate the learning objectives. And again, from Jane Goodall platform, this is an assessment rubric. I've been using it. It's very useful and easy to do it. But first, you have to introduce the students to these 9 traits and skills and traits. For somebody already said today about leadership. I think it was you? No? Yeah, Yasmin. Or Tom. But yeah, we have to work on leadership, okay? On service leadership. So I just wrote on, when I took my notes, so on the Root and Shoots platform, you will find these traits and skills that relate to leadership, compassionate leaderships, okay? So first you present to the students the traits, and you do a lot, there are a lot of indications how to include them, to present them to various categories of age learners, okay? Learners of various age categories. Okay. So, and then you can use this rubric for assessment, self-assessment, okay? How were you at the beginning of the course or the service learning activity and after? You can also ask them to do it, together. What do you think? If I'm gonna ask Bojana, did I improve on that and that, okay? And then you see, when you look at the skills and the traits that they touch, okay, that they cover actually all the aspects that we discussed today in terms of benefits or what we should target, through service learning. And some resources, not a spam, okay? So the service, so it's our manual, and you can find it in English or other languages. And here you have a lot of examples. Okay, yes. Well, we are all non-native English speakers, so if you find some, complicated, phrases, it's us. So, yeah, this is from a study, I think it was done in Italy, I'm not sure. No, in Dominican, sorry. That's the source. So they asked the students, what do they think about, just name one word. And you see, here you can see all the aspects that we covered. So thank you for your attention.